I never thought my dignity would be ripped apart in front of 50 people on an ordinary Tuesday morning. But that's exactly what happened. I was standing in the middle of the conference room, holding a stack of reports I had worked on for 3 straight nights. My hands were trembling, not from nervousness, but from exhaustion. And then, my boss, Mr. Walker, slammed the report against the table so hard that the sound echoed like a gunshot. "Is this a joke, Margaret?" he barked, his voice dripping with contempt. Every single head in the room turned toward me. The new interns, the senior staff, even the janitor who had stepped in to adjust the air conditioning, they all froze. I swallowed hard. "Sir, I double-checked the figures. They're accurate." "Accurate?" He cut me off with a mocking laugh. "This report is garbage. Look at her, everyone. 40 years in this company, and she still can't get a simple analysis right. This is why companies need fresh blood instead of clinging to old fossils." A wave of laughter erupted in the room. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to burn through my pride like acid. I could feel my face turning crimson. My chest tightened. Words sat at the edge of my tongue, but my throat refused to release them. "Sir," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "I stayed up all night finishing this." "Oh, please," he interrupted again, raising his arms dramatically. "Do you hear that, everyone?" She stayed up all night. And yet she still produced trash. Maybe it's time we all learned that hard work doesn't mean quality when it comes from someone past their expiration date. Someone in the back snickered. Someone else shook their head with pity. That moment, it wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal. I had given this company more than 2 decades of my life. I had mentored half the people in this room. And now I was being paraded like a clown, all because my boss wanted to look powerful. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of them, not in front of him. I clenched my fists and tried to steady my voice. "With respect, Mr. Walker, the numbers are correct. If you just—" He smirked. "Oh, really? Then why don't you tell us all how you managed to mess up so badly? Or is your memory failing along with everything else?" The room erupted again, this time louder. Laughter mixed with whispers, like knives stabbing me from every direction. I wanted to scream, to shout at them, to remind them who I was. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, humiliated, and burning with a rage that shook me to my core. Finally, Mr. Walker waved me off like a child. "Sit down, Margaret. Let the younger ones handle this. Clearly, you're out of your depth." The words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. I sat, clutching the edge of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. My entire body shook, but not from weakness, from anger, from the storm inside me that none of them could see. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was just a tired old woman clinging to a paycheck. They thought I had no value left. But they didn't know. They didn't know who I really was before this job. They didn't know the battles I had fought, the empires I had seen rise and fall, the secrets I carried that could make even Mr. Walker bow his head in shame. I looked across the table at him, his smug smile plastered across his face as he moved on with the meeting, dismissing me like I was a speck of dust. And in that moment, I made a silent promise. He would regret this. The meeting ended, people filing out one by one, their eyes darting between pity and mockery as they passed me. But I stayed seated, my hands shaking, my jaw clenched, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Then, as the last person left the room, Mr. Walker stopped at the door and looked back at me. His words sliced me like a knife. "Do yourself a favor, Margaret," he said coldly. "Start packing your things. This company doesn't need dead weight." The door clicked shut behind him, and I just sat there, frozen. But inside, a fire had been lit. They didn't know my past, They didn't know the power I still had. And very soon, they would. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the sneer, the mockery, the way everyone laughed when he called me dead weight. But lying in the dark, I also felt something else. The fire in my chest was no longer humiliation. It was determination. For the first time in years, I knew what I had to do. I sat up, turned on the lamp beside my bed, and reached for the small wooden box hidden under the bottom drawer of my dresser. It was old, dusty, almost forgotten, but inside it was my real identity. I opened it, and there they were, the documents, the photographs, the newspaper clippings, reminders of the woman I used to be before this job, before this small life. Because the truth is, I wasn't always Margaret, the tired old employee. Once, I was Margaret Shaw, the woman who had built a business empire from scratch in my 30s, the woman who had been betrayed by her own husband, swindled out of millions, and forced to start from zero again. And worst of all, I had been humiliated before, by people I trusted, by the one man I thought would never betray me. I could still hear his voice, Daniel's, my late husband. Margaret, you don't understand. Business is no place for women like you. Leave the decisions to me. But I had understood. I had seen every transaction, every forged document, every lie he had woven until one day, I walked into the bank and found that all our accounts were empty. I had lost everything: the company, the house, the friends who had pretended to care. And Daniel? He disappeared with his young secretary, leaving me bankrupt and disgraced. I had clawed my way back from that abyss, quietly, silently, building my savings again, taking small jobs, hiding my real past because I couldn't trust anyone anymore. And now, years later, here I was, being humiliated all over again, only this time by a boss who thought he knew me. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. People stared. Some pitied me. Some avoided my eyes. Some whispered behind my back, "Poor woman. She'll be gone by Friday. Did you hear what Mr. Walker said? Brutal. She should just retire already." I pretended not to hear. I had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than words. But one person didn't stay silent. It was Claire, one of the junior analysts I had trained years ago. She followed me into the break room. "Margaret," she whispered urgently, "why did you let him talk to you like that?" "You're better than this." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes silence is strategy, Claire. Don't confuse quiet with weakness." She frowned. "But are you really going to let him push you out? He's already telling people you're finished." I sipped my coffee, hiding the storm inside me. Let him think that. That afternoon, something happened that pushed me closer to action. I overheard Mr. Walker on the phone in his office. His door was slightly open, and his voice carried down the hall. "Yes, yes, the board will approve it. Once Margaret's out, there'll be no one to question the numbers. She's the only one who pays attention." My blood ran cold. So that was his game. He wasn't just humiliating me for fun. He was covering something up. I pressed my ear closer. No, she won't fight back. She's old, tired. She doesn't have the courage anymore. By next week, we'll have moved the funds, and no one will even notice. Funds? Moving money? What was he talking about? I backed away, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about me anymore. Something bigger was happening. Something dirty. And if he thought I was going to walk away quietly, he had no idea who he was dealing with. That night, I called my son David. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I just needed to hear his voice. "Mom," he sighed, "I told you years ago you should quit that place." "Why are you still working there? You don't need to prove anything." "You don't understand, David," I said quietly. "It's not just about work. Something's wrong at that company. He chuckled bitterly. You're paranoid. Just let it go. Enjoy what's left of your life. Don't go digging where you shouldn't. His words stung. They reminded me too much of his father. Don't go digging. Don't get involved. Always telling me to stay small, stay quiet. David, I whispered, if I stay quiet, innocent people could lose everything. There was silence on the other end. Then he muttered, Do what you want, Mom. But don't come crying to me when it backfires. The line went dead. I sat in the dark staring at the documents from my past. Old newspaper articles about my rise and fall, court papers from the lawsuit I lost, bank statements showing how Daniel had ruined me. I touched the edges of those pages, feeling the scars they carried. This was my chance. Not just for revenge against Mr. Walker, but for redemption. Because I knew how men like him operated. I knew the lies, the manipulations, the greed, and this time I wasn't going to be the victim. The next morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. The halls were empty, silent. I headed straight for the archive room, where old files and financial records were stored. I began searching, my hands trembling but my resolve solid. Minutes turned into hours, until finally, I found it, a folder, thick, stuffed with papers, numbers, transactions, offshore accounts. Proof that Mr. Walker wasn't just cruel, he was a thief. I held the folder tightly against my chest, and just as I was about to slip it into my bag, I heard a voice behind me. Well, well, Mr. Walker said coldly, his shadow filling the doorway. What exactly do you think you're doing, Margaret? His shadow loomed over me as I clutched the folder against my chest. Well, well, Mr. Walker said slowly, his voice like a blade. What exactly do you think you're doing, Margaret? I froze for only a second, then straightened my back. My hands were trembling, but my voice wasn't, looking for the truth. He chuckled, stepping closer until I could smell his cologne. Sharp, expensive, arrogant. The truth? He sneered. The truth is that you're a washed-up old woman clinging to a job you should have left a decade ago. No one believes you. No one cares. I met his gaze. We'll see about that. By the time the staff arrived later that morning, whispers were already spreading. Walker had summoned me to the conference room, in front of everyone. He wanted to finish what he had started the day he humiliated me. The room buzzed with tension as employees filed in, some curious, some nervous. Claire gave me a worried glance, but I nodded faintly. At the head of the table, Walker stood tall, his voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to address an incident that occurred this morning. One of our employees, his eyes flicked to me like daggers, was caught rifling through confidential financial records. Gasps, murmurs, all eyes turned to me. He continued, smug as ever. This behavior cannot be tolerated. I've tolerated her incompetence long enough, but now she's crossed the line. Effective immediately, Margaret Shaw is suspended and under review for termination. I felt every word like a hammer against my chest. The humiliation was sharp, but not unbearable. Not anymore. Because I had something he didn't expect, I rose slowly, holding the folder in my hands. My voice was calm but cut through the murmurs. Is that so, Mr. Walker? Then maybe you'd like to explain why these files. I opened the folder and laid the documents on the table. Show transfers of over $3 million and to offshore accounts under shell companies, all approved by your signature. The room went dead silent. Walker's face twitched, just for a moment before he forced a laugh. Ridiculous. Forged documents. Lies. But I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving his. Funny, because I remember being mocked for paying too much attention to numbers, for double-checking reports, for keeping copies no one else bothered to keep. But it seems those habits finally paid off. Claire gasped, Another employee whispered, "Is this real?" Walker slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing but a bitter old woman with a vendetta." I took a deep breath. My next words were heavier than steel. Maybe they won't believe Margaret the employee, but they might believe Margaret Shaw, former CEO of Shaw Enterprises. The room exploded with shocked voices. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Walker blinked, stunned. "What?" I nodded slowly. "That's right." Before I ever worked here, I ran my own company. I know what fraud looks like. I know how greedy men like you operate. And I know exactly how to bring them down. Walker's mask cracked. Sweat beaded his forehead. "You're lying," he spat, but his voice had lost its strength. "No," I said firmly. "For years I kept quiet about who I was. I wanted peace, but you pushed me too far. And now?" I held up the folder. "Now, I have everything I need to destroy you." The room was so silent I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then Claire stood up, her voice shaking but determined. "I've seen some of those reports." "I thought the numbers didn't add up," another employee chimed in. "Me too, but I was afraid to say anything." Whispers grew louder. Fear shifted into doubt, and doubt into anger. Anger directed at Walker. Walker raised his voice desperately. "You fools! Do you really think she can save you? She's nothing. She's finished." I stepped closer until we were only inches apart. My voice was low, but it carried like thunder. "No, Mr. Walker. The only one who's finished is you." At that exact moment, the conference room door swung open. Two men in dark suits walked in, flashing badges. The entire room gasped. "Mr. Thomas Walker?" One of them said firmly. "We need you to come with us. You're under investigation for corporate fraud." Walker's face drained of color. What is this? Who?" He turned to me, his voice breaking. "You call them?" I held his gaze, steady as stone. "Let's just say, I've learned from my past mistakes. I knew you'd try to bury me, so I made sure I wasn't the only one who saw the evidence." The agents moved forward, taking him by the arm. Employees whispered, stunned, as Walker fought uselessly. But then, just as he was about to be led out the door, he stopped struggling, turned back, and shouted across the room, "This isn't over, Margaret! You think you've won, but you don't know the whole truth. You have no idea who you're really up against." And before I could respond, his eyes locked onto mine with all. The room was frozen in silence as the agents took Mr. Walker by the arms. His expensive suit looked suddenly cheap, his face pale and sweaty under the harsh fluorescent lights. Employees whispered, phones clicked discreetly, and I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes shifting between him and me. "This isn't over, Margaret," he shouted again, his voice cracking with desperation. "You don't know who you're dealing with." For a moment, no one breathed, and then Claire's voice cut through the silence. "We know exactly who we were dealing with, a fraud and a bully." Gasps filled the air. The tide had shifted. Walker twisted violently, trying to shake free from the agents. "You fools! You think this old woman saved you? She's nothing. Without me, this company is dead." But no one moved to support him. Instead, people pulled back as if his corruption were contagious. One of the accountants, a quiet man named Stephen, suddenly spoke up. His voice was trembling but firm. I saw discrepancies too. I thought it was a mistake. But now I realize you made me sign off on falsified reports." Another voice chimed in. "He threatened to fire me if I questioned the budgets. And he cut my hours when I asked about missing funds." Voices rose one after another, a chorus of betrayal laid bare. Walker's face collapsed into rage and panic. "Lies! All lies, he screamed, but the louder he shouted, the more powerless he looked. The humiliation was complete. The man who once towered over us with arrogance now looked like a desperate child, cornered and alone. I stepped forward, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. My voice carried across the room with clarity. This company is not dead without you, Mr. Walker. It was dying because of you. You thought humiliating me would silence me, but instead you gave me back my voice, and now everyone here sees the truth. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and then the room erupted in applause. Not wild, not cheerful, just strong, determined clapping, like a verdict being delivered. Walker's eyes darted around, wild with disbelief. You're all ungrateful. I built this place. You'll regret this. But the applause drowned him out, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The agents pulled him toward the door, but before leaving, one of them turned to me. Mrs. Shaw, thank you for your cooperation. The evidence you provided is more than enough to proceed. You'll be contacted for testimony. The word testimony hit me like a wave. This wasn't just an office scandal anymore. It was a full-blown legal case. Walker tried one last time to twist free. You think you've won, Margaret? You think this is justice? You have no idea the kind of people I've been dealing with. If I go down... His words cut off as the agent shoved him forward. The door slammed behind them. The echo lingered in the air like thunder. For a long moment, no one spoke. The entire office stood in stunned silence, the reality sinking in. Then, slowly, conversations began. Relief, anger, shock, all spilling out at once. Claire rushed to my side, her eyes glistening. You saved us. I don't know how to thank you. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll never let fear silence you again. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Stephen stepped forward. Margaret, will you stay? We need someone like you to lead us through this mess. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to, but another part knew my journey was still unfolding. Over the next few days, the scandal exploded in the media. Headlines screamed across newspapers and websites. Corporate fraud exposed, CEO arrested in shocking sting. Whistleblower revealed as former CEO Margaret Shaw. Reporters camped outside the building. Employees were questioned by investigators. Clients demanded answers. And through it all, I remained calm. I gave my testimony. I handed over every document. I told the truth, even when it meant reopening old wounds. Walker's assets were frozen, his accounts seized, his reputation shattered beyond repair. For the first time in years, justice didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt real. Yet, as satisfying as it was, something still gnawed at me. His last words echoed in my mind. You have no idea the kind of people I've been dealing with. What did he mean? Was there someone bigger behind him? Was this fraud just the surface of something darker? One evening, I found myself alone in the office, staring out at the city lights. My reflection in the glass looked older. Yes, but stronger too. Claire entered quietly. You okay? I smiled faintly. I should be, but I can't shake the feeling this isn't over. She frowned. What do you mean? I turned back to the window, my voice low. If Walker was just a piece on the board, then who's moving the pieces? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken fear. It's been almost 2 years since that day, the day my past collided with my present, and justice finally came knocking on my boss's door. Mr. Walker is no longer Mr. Walker, the powerful CEO. He is now inmate number 45,628, serving a long sentence for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and worker exploitation. The headlines that once glorified him now serve as reminders of how greed can consume a man's soul. But this story, it was never just about him. It was about me, about all of us who've ever been silenced, humiliated, or underestimated. In the weeks following his arrest, chaos swept through the company. Investors panicked, employees feared for their jobs, and the future seemed uncertain. Yet, something extraordinary happened. Instead of collapsing, the company began to heal. With Walker gone, the toxic fear that had ruled our halls dissolved. People started to speak up, share ideas, and rebuild trust. I didn't stay on as CEO. That part of my life was finished, and I knew it. But I stayed long enough to mentor Claire and Stephen, guiding them to rebuild with integrity and transparency. Watching them step into leadership reminded me of a truth I had almost forgotten. Sometimes, the best way to lead is to step aside. After leaving the corporate world behind, I asked myself a question. What now, Margaret? For years, I had carried the pain of betrayal, the weight of humiliation, and the scars of silence. But now, I realized those scars could become someone else's roadmap. So I started small, coffee meetings with former colleagues who needed advice, mentoring young women who felt trapped in toxic workplaces, speaking at community events about resilience and dignity. And then, one day, Claire looked at me and said, "Why don't you make this bigger? Why don't you start something lasting?" That was the birth of the Phoenix Foundation, named after the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. Our mission is simple but powerful: to help workers, especially older ones, who are victims of workplace abuse, discrimination, or financial manipulation. Today, our foundation has helped more than 600 people find justice, rebuild their lives, and reclaim their self-worth. Some regained lost savings, others found new careers. Many simply found their voices again. On a personal level, the journey wasn't easy. For a long time, my children had watched me suffer in silence, and they carried guilt for not recognizing it sooner. But the truth is, I had hidden it well. The day I told them everything, the humiliation, the abuse, the betrayal, they cried with me. And in that moment, I understood that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation with those who hurt you. Sometimes it means opening your wounds honestly with those who love you and letting them help you carry the weight. My daughter now works alongside me at the foundation. My son visits often with his children, who remind me daily that joy is not lost with age. It is reborn in every laugh, every hug, every little hand that holds mine. Looking back, I see my story not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. My boss thought humiliation would break me. Instead, it became the spark that reignited my strength. He thought exposing me would ruin me. Instead, I exposed him. Here's the lesson I want you, yes, you watching this video right now, to remember: never confuse silence with weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it is survival. And when the time is right, your voice can shake the ground beneath those who underestimated you. Respect has no expiration date. Whether you are 25 or 65, your dignity matters. Do not let anyone treat you as if you are disposable. Pain can become purpose. What nearly destroys you can become the very thing that saves others. Now, at 70 years old, I wake up every morning with a sense of peace I never thought I'd feel again. My days are filled with writing, mentoring, gardening, and fighting for those who still think they have no voice. I don't regret the humiliation. I don't regret the pain, because both of them carry me here to a life more authentic, more meaningful, and more free than ever before. So if you are listening to my story tonight, ask yourself this: what ashes are you ready to rise from? Because trust me, no matter how broken you feel, your story isn't over. The next chapter could be your most powerful yet. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever felt underestimated? And how did you find your strength? And remember, subscribe for more life stories that prove it's never too late to rise again. With love, respect, and resilience, Margaret Shaw.